WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisCI to 44321.
Representative Amy Binsfeld of Sheboygan is the Republican candidate in the 26th Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Representative Binsfeld, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thanks for participating in this candidate interview. I'll start by asking you, what's your campaign's key message? Why are you running for re-election to the Assembly?
Well, I think much like 2 years ago, I look at trying to find balance. I feel that when I talk to constituents, they want to know that their voices are being heard. They want to know that whether their concern is in health care, whether it's education, maybe it's the infrastructure and road conditions, their safety in our communities, they want to know that somebody's hearing them and there's a balanced approach being provided to them in Madison. Lately, what I've heard the most of, again, has been the inflation and the economy in which we're working. So I think they just really want to know that somebody is there to represent them no matter which avenue they're coming down for ideas, that there's going to be a balanced approach taken on their behalf.
So if you're reelected to the Assembly, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you to introduce?
Well, again, looking at how last session ended, of course, you'd like to accomplish more than you do sometimes. And there were a couple things left on the table for me, different ideas that I'd been working on. One of those stems around working with the Sheboygan Human Trafficking Task Force, And there was a bill that we worked on, but it needs some modifications. And I am very excited to keep working on that and hopefully get that through into the governor's desk this time. Another area that I worked in, I was chair of the Truancy Task Force. And it was a very enjoyable experience to get to know different ideas and hear from different ideas and players that are involved with our youth and what keeps them from coming to school. So I think there's a lot of areas that we need to work on some legislation there as well, along with all those other voices that are in my head from different constituents and ideas.
So, as you know, if you're reelected, you're entering during a biennial budget year. The state's projected to have more than a $3 billion surplus. Mm-hmm. What would be your top two priorities for the use of that surplus funding?
I think anytime I look at a surplus, it makes me realize that too much has been taken. And when I look at that, it brings me obviously to taxes. And when I look at this past legislation period, we looked at what is happening with our tax-paying base. And if we're taking too much, I feel that we shouldn't be. So rather than find ways for the government to spend their money, I would love to see that money returned to those individuals. Two of the areas that I was really disappointed didn't happen this past session. Different tax cut bills were put before the governor, but particularly I think the one that was a little bit more gut-wrenching to me, two of them, was the one that included families from $28,000 to $150,000, which is the vast majority of Wisconsin families could have seen an increase to their own budgets by getting their own money back. And unfortunately, our governor vetoed that. And then when I looked at the other area, which I felt very, very strongly on, has to do with our fixed income families and those that have worked for many, many years and have gotten into their retirement years. We might call them our treasured seniors. And we want to make sure that they're enjoying their time here in Sheboygan, in Wisconsin in general, but for me, Sheboygan. And having that tax relief to their incomes could have also benefited them with the inflation that they're facing. So for me, it's truly about focusing on the people and making sure that we are not continuing to take money that they can spend better than we can.
Would you have any spending priorities or investment priorities in addition to that for use of surplus funding?
I think there are areas that could be addressed. We'll kind of probably touch on some of that when it comes to education. But overall, I think trying to make sure we're not in a situation where we're going to have to increase continued funding year over year. So I think it's a very, again, strategic approach to trying to spend those funds and not put the taxpayers on the hook that every year we need that money from them, and rather try and find that balance with them right now to keep it in their pockets.
So you mentioned education. K-12 education is a leading issue for many voters. What is your campaign's top priority for K-12 education?
Well, when I think about education, obviously I'm looking at it now from a legislative side, but in the past, and for the past 19 years of my life, I've looked at it from a mother's perspective. And as someone who has done that, I've realized that my two children are not cookie cutters, and they learn differently. And I think most families find that when they have multiple children, some will excel in one area and not another. I don't think that's unusual. So I think it's extremely important for us in the legislature to continue to support any type of options for school choices for kids and families, because when the families and the kids can thrive, then that only benefits us in the end with our economy as well. Also looking at that, I think special education, and that's when you're asking where can we maybe invest a little bit more. As I'm in the community talking to different superintendents, which I try to meet with more regularly, I hear oftentimes the underfunding of the special education portion of our system. And I think for me personally, it's one of the top things at my list that needs to be addressed this session. How are we going to work with that and make sure that those kids' needs are met, those families' needs are met? As I previously mentioned, I have two kids, and I will share that one of mine is dyslexic. Statistically, it shows that 1 in 6 children has a degree of dyslexia. And that is one of the things I was so proud to be a part of with Representative Kitchens leading the way on the Right to Read bill. That was a bill that is going to bring phonetic learning back into our schools. We've seen our reading grades drop over the last years, which has been heart-wrenching for parents and students. So I'm very excited that that bill did get across the finish line. I'm very hopeful that we are going to see, shortly that those scores will start to improve. And we know that when kids succeed, a lot of different things happen, including better mental health. Imagine when you feel beaten down every day at school, what that's got to be for them. So hopefully we will see an uptick there. Hopefully we will see, thriving kids that are coming out of our schools and participating in our communities. So those are some of the areas I see education going, and I'm excited to try and be a part of that again.
What about higher education, the state's four-year colleges, two-year colleges, technical colleges? What does the future of that system look like to you, and where should the legislature focus?
I feel the more the better. So again, I've already hit on, they're not cookie cutters. So I think now more than ever in the high school levels, it's going to be very important for the high school children to be guided. I'm a huge proponent and lover of youth apprenticeship programs. I feel if we could expand that to try and engage our kids into areas that are of interest to them at a younger age, that would guide them. Are they more on the path to the 2-year degree? Do they need the 4-year degree? Is maybe a military future ahead of them? Is a workforce job ahead of them? Try and guide them with their interests rather than make them feel as though they have to follow a path that another student, or that they're going to be left behind because they didn't take the path of their friend. So I think now more than ever it's about encouraging our kids. One of the bills that I worked on this past session had to do with the EdVest accounts. And I think that was such a key component that we changed in there to allow that money, that tax-free contribution that parents could be putting aside to be used for apprenticeship programs and to involve some of our kids in the trades. So I just see great things in all of those areas, and they all need to be utilized.
Do you support additional funding for the University of Wisconsin system?
I think it's one of those areas I'm watching that that committee kind of move forward. I'd like more information on it. I think anytime more money is needed, we need to make sure, where's the money going? Is there a plan for it? If a strategic plan of its use can be laid out, I think it's something to be considered, but I definitely don't want to just say, here's some dollars. I want to know specifically, where's the need, how are we going to fill it, and why is it there?
What do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and how would you propose to address it?
I think overall it's lack of people. When I've looked at statistics in the past, I believe the peak of the birth in the country was in 2007. That means that since 2007, our birth rates have declined. When you think about that, that means 18 years old. These kids are now going to be 18 years old. So we have years ahead of us to face this challenge, and it can't be taken lightly. But knowing that, Wisconsin has to look for people outside of Wisconsin to come in and help. So that means how do we attract them here? And I think we've already touched on it a little bit. When people work, they want to reap the benefits of that work. So with a high income tax rate, that can turn some people away. We talked about schools and education. When people feel they're coming to a state that has an excellent school system, lots of choices, and are going to meet the needs of those kids and those families, I think that too is a huge draw into the community. As much as I love Wisconsin Four Seasons, not everyone does. We can't change that, but we can definitely change the atmosphere when it comes to other things. So I think we need to work on all those areas.
A couple of more workforce questions for you. Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. This also provides an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and in utility scale infrastructure investments?
I absolutely think the first place we should turn for workers is our own state. As somebody who grew up in a family business, I can tell you that having my community members work alongside me was huge. I think when you can look at something in your own community, in your own state, and say, I was a part of that, it's a sense of pride. So absolutely, we need to focus on making sure that the work is being done by local people and let them feel that sense of pride and joy that they can take in that work each day.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this issue, and what do you think should be done about it?
Well, I think it's an issue that has probably been around since the beginning of time. I think part of trying to look at it happening is asking yourself, why is it happening? And I think sometimes you're going to find, if you actually find the people who are doing those things, whether it's the person working for the cash or the person paying the cash, you're going to find two sources. One, the person may be trying to make that extra side cash. Well, is that because they feel they're overtax burdened and they want to take that vacation away with their family? Something to consider. Why do they need that extra money? Where can we as a state benefit them in their lives that they don't feel they have to do that? And then from an employer's standpoint, why would somebody choose to hire somebody that way? Could it be overregulation by the government, interference on their behalf? So I think if you want to get to the root of that problem and bring what some are going to call fairness back to that market, we need to look at what's causing it to happen. So that would be kind of all I would say. We need to look at the reasoning behind it.
Transitioning to housing. Affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some support government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What is your sense of housing as an issue, and which best addresses rental housing affordability? Is it rent control or building more rentals or some other solution?
Well, this is a huge issue for many communities. I'm in a community that is extremely blessed. We have a lot of industry, we have a lot of corporations. I think rent control is not something that I'm in favor of. I think, again, the government involvement there could actually cause more harm than good. So unintended consequences could be not beneficial, although the intent is good. It could cause more issues. When I'm looking at my own community and what is happening there, we do have, again, great businesses that have worked together. They are developing workforce development projects. And the more I believe that communities can come together, and between the community, between businesses, corporations that are in the area, if they can come together and solve these issues from a more private level, I just feel that in the end it's going to be a better solution for everybody.
Is there any role for the state in incentivizing or helping to facilitate that?
Well, we did actually this past session, we did have some housing bills as well. Some of them, of course, were to try and take the big box stores that have been taken away from the community use and make them into something that could be beneficial for housing. There was the grants. I think some of the grants are probably more what we could hit on, utilizing those in some of the projects to incentivize people to do that work. But again, the rent control part of it is not something I feel is going to be in the best interest in the end.
Moving on to healthcare. Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
Yeah, it was hard to hear that was happening. Of course, as I've said, many people are concerned about the healthcare industry. And I think when we look at the healthcare industry as a whole, you have to see that you want it to be accessible, you want it to be affordable, and you want the quality care that you deserve. So when you're looking at those areas, you have to make sure any legislation, anything you're working on benefits all three, or it could, again, pose some issues. A couple of the areas that we worked in the legislature was to try and make sure that we were working with people to try and bring them into the medical field again, to try and get more employees back in. I think if we can restaff our hospitals better and engage people back into the healthcare facility, we worked on some of the dental areas to try and re-engage people in those as well. If we can get those employees back, that's going to bring back up the quality. When you have the quality, you're going to then hopefully keep your accessibility. As far as Medicaid goes, I think sometimes we're looking at the wrong approach there. We're always seeming to want to get more people on the program. From my perspective, how do we help people become more self-sustainable in their own lives? Give them the benefit to step up and end up standing on their own 2 feet with a great sustainable job where they can move off of that program, still allowing it to be provided to those that need it. I believe in something that I read recently, only 5% of hospitals that have closed have cited the fact that it was due to underpayment.
Low Medicaid rates? Okay. Mental health care, also a growing concern for many Wisconsinites and for county and state budgets. In your district, what are you hearing on this issue, and how would you address mental health care?
Again, as I think every district probably across the state, we are seeing that growth there. I think a lot of it is happening in our youth, our younger people, and we did address that a little bit in this past session by putting some funding into our schools to try and address that some of that could happen and be addressed at the school facility for those students, which I think is key. I think working with our students to make sure they're finding success, whether that's in those reading programs or getting them on the right path to a career that they're excited about. And I think that too can help, but absolutely we need to remain focused on mental health overall, whether it's our children, whether it's our community members, and work together to find ways in which to keep funding that.
How should Wisconsin move forward on the issue of abortion?
Oh, and there is the topic that is so emotional for so many people. And I'm not immune to that emotion. Obviously, as a woman and a mother, I can see where this is something that is very divisive between voters. And many doors that I have been at, this conversation has come up. As of today, many people are still not realizing here in Wisconsin the state law is at 20 weeks to allow an abortion to happen. And I think people need to know specifically what we're living in right now. And then for me, I look back at what the last session brought for me. I did support exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother and co-sponsored a bill on that. I was very adamant and felt strongly that we needed to address expanding access to birth control for women. If women can feel they're being preventative rather than reactive later, having control of that in their own lives is key. I've had friends, family members that have struggled to get pregnant. I 100% support IVF. I do not think that anyone should be involved in that, but the woman and their doctors.
Do you support the current 20-week limit then?
I think so. I guess ultimately what I think should be is I also supported a referendum to go to the people, and in the end, I want the referendum to go to the people. So the law is what the law is. If the people want to weigh in on it, I think that to me has been the key, is let it go to the people.
Transportation. What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these needs are addressed and for the state to keep on schedule with the reconstruction of aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
I think there's always a need for transportation. I hear it more, I think, from maybe some disabled residents that are trying to get from point A to point B. Sheboygan's very unique. We use our transportation system in the city to actually transport our kids to school. So there's a deal that has been made between the school system and the transportation system, which I think is awesome, and I hope that continues for many more years. Overall, again, it's something that needs to probably branch out a little bit of the city limits. It's just how far that can go, I'm not sure, but it definitely needs to be considered.
Expansion of public transportation options.
Yeah, we need to kind of look at what will be there.
The environment. PFAS and other water contaminants are a growing concern for a number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how would you propose to address it?
Well, when I look at the last session again, I know we did pass a bill, and I was proud to be a part of and vote for a bill that provided $125 million for PFAS cleanup. I believe that we were working well in the bill to try and make sure that that money was not just going to be there, but would be directed at the best use of it. You know, when you're going to do a project like that, you need to trust the people that are involved, the people that know how to utilize it. So when that plan was set forth, along with the partners that helped draft it, I think it was designed to use it effectively and efficiently. It was unfortunate that the governor felt the need to veto that.
We are down to our final two questions. How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
I think when I look at my own life, it has completely been in the private sector. Obviously, I mentioned I came out of a family business, so I grew up watching that. So whether it was the grocery store or my retail store, and then later as I got my paralegal degree and worked in a law firm, it was a lot about conflict resolution, because people are not always happy with the decisions that are made or how a product may have come out or whatever the situation was. So I learned at a young age that you have to listen to people, you have to engage with them, and then together see if you can find that solution. So 2 years ago, when I decided to run for office and try and enter into the public sector, I decided that it was just the prime of my career, but I felt such a strong calling to say I want to serve the people in a different capacity. So here I am today, hoping that I can continue that forward.
All right. Final question. If you are reelected to the Assembly and you're given some magic wand that you can use in the state capitol to resolve one issue in a way that brings all parties together, what would that one issue be?
Oh, I don't know if I could do a direct issue. I think it would just more or less be to wave it over the entire building and say, let's bring down the divisive nature. I think so often people on the outside, they do love to hear that Republicans and Democrats do talk in Madison, and too often that's overlooked. So for me, that wand would just say, it is okay for us to interact with each other, to laugh together, to greet each other kindly. So more or less just use it in a positive way to see that we're individuals and we don't always have to have an R or D after our name.
Well, thank you, Representative Amy Binsfeld from Sheboygan, the Republican candidate for the 26th Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Representative Binsfeld, thank you, Binsfeld. Sorry about that. Thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.